Amen. Merry Christmas Eve. It is the fourth Sunday of Advent, but it also doubles with Christmas Eve this year. So we honor both of those today in our sanctuary. While I am getting ready to preach, I would love for you to share this light with each other. It will come in handy. So grab a candle. You can choose if you want a real one or a fake one. I know some of you are not good with fire. Amen. So we got to back up. We got the fake ones for you. So go ahead and pass them down as you are able if you need to, okay? And we will do that at the end of service. This Sunday, we are focusing on Luke chapter 1, verses 26 through 38. Luke chapter 1, verses 26 through 38. If you remember last Sunday, we were in Luke chapter 1, and we were reading the Magnificat, which is verses 46 through 55. But I told you I would walk it back this Sunday to get more of Mary's story. So Luke chapter 1, verses 26 through 38. I am reading from the New Revised Standard Version. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent by God to a town in Galilee called Nazareth, to a virgin engaged to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David. The virgin's name was Mary. And Gabriel came to her and said, "Greetings, favored one, the Lord is with you." But Mary was much perplexed by his words and pondered what sort of greeting this might be. The angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God. And now you will conceive and in your womb and bear a son, and you will name him Yeshua, Jesus, the one who saves us. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High, and the Lord God will give to him the throne of his ancestor David. He will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end." Mary said to Gabriel, the angel, "How can this be, since I am a virgin?" The angel said to her, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore, the child will be born, will be holy, and he will be called the Son of God. And now your relative Elizabeth, in her old age, has also conceived, and this is the 6th month for her who was said to be barren. For nothing is impossible with God." Then Mary says, "Here I am, servant of the Lord. Let it be with me according to your word." Let it be with me according to your word. Then the angel departed from her. The word of God for the people of God. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom. Let it be. And in my hour of darkness, she is standing right in front of me, speaking words of wisdom. Let it be. 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 Whisper words of wisdom. Let it be. If there is ever a time we've needed Mary's "let it be," it is now. In Bethlehem this year, Christmas is canceled. I know all over the rest of the world, people are still out doing their last-minute shopping. I had a friend who went to Target on Friday, bad mistake. He should have known that the parking lot was going to be crowded. People are still carrying on as normal in many parts of the world, but in Bethlehem this year, Christmas is canceled. There will be no Christmas in the city of Bethlehem, the house of bread. That's what Bethlehem means. In the house of bread, there will be no Christmas this year. The city that is synonymous with the birth of Jesus, located in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, there will be no Christmas. On NPR, I was listening to their recent podcast interview they did, and they said that Palestinian leaders of Christian denominations came together and, citing the devastating war in Gaza, made a unanimous decision to cancel public celebrations. There will be no Christmas tree in the square this year. There will be no Christmas parade weaving through the ancient cobweb streets. Since the October 7th attack by Hamas that killed over 1,000 Israelis, the Israel Defense Force has killed over 20,000 Palestinians with no end in sight. Children, babies buried in the rubble. The religious aspects of Christmas are still happening. They are still having small worship services and masses, but the fanfare has been called off. What is known as the House of Bread sits eerily quiet this year as Palestinian children with no bread starve. Reverend Munther Isaac of the Church of the Nativity says it's time for us, once and for all, to de-romanticize the holiday. Bethlehem is not a fairy tale town, he says. Real things are happening here. Real people are suffering here. And this year, we are going to have to rip off the Band-Aid of the fanfare and the celebration so we can sit with the pain and the suffering that is just a couple of inches away. Christmas is going to be a little different this year. Some of you have heard that before. I remember when I was a kid and my mother would sometimes say, you know, Mia, Christmas is going to be a little different this year. I knew that meant I was getting less presents. Maybe we weren't going to have a big feast. Christmas is going to be a little different this year. For many, even in this country, who find themselves stressed out, stretched to capacity financially, there is no surplus money for expensive gifts. Perhaps there is not even enough money for a fancy big dinner tomorrow. The thing is, we expect excessive joy this time of year. We expect excessive food, excessive spending, excessive receiving of gifts, but in a time of inflation, in a time of war, in a time where there is violence at our front doors and our back doors, at a time of political dysfunction and uncertainty, many of us find ourselves asking, where are you, Christmas? Where are you, Christmas? We have romanticized this story for 2,000 years, but this year, Christmas is canceled in Bethlehem. There is a nativity, Reverend Isaac said, outside of his church, the Church of the Nativity, but it looks different this year. Instead of the traditional nativity where there is a baby Jesus wrapped in cloth and his parents are next to him and there are animals all around, cute animals, and the three wise men come and they are bearing gifts. Instead of that nativity, this year at Reverend Isaac's church in Bethlehem, there is a baby wrapped in keffiyeh. There is a baby as the baby is laid underneath rubble, some cement blocks that they have gathered, and the wise people and the parents aren't rejoicing. They are coming to see if they can rescue the baby from the rubble. There is no room in the proper guest house. on the other side of the border, no room in paradise. What a time to be born. What a time to be born. Is there any room for something to be born and something to live in the midst of all the turmoil? I imagine Mary asking herself a similar question back in the day when an angel named Gabriel rolled up on her in the middle of the night to tell her that she would be conceiving a child and that she would give birth to a son and that his name would be Jesus. That she would give birth in the midst of turmoil, in the midst of poverty, in the midst of political dysfunction. I'm sure Mary had similar questions. Can anything live in this climate? Can anything thrive in this climate? What is the point of giving birth in this world where the pieces are crumbling and everything is falling apart? Mary's birth announcement comes after John the Baptist's birth is foretold. You see, Luke had to set Elizabeth's story up first because Luke needed to make sure that Mary understood that with God anything was possible, that God would turn the impossible into possibility, and wanted to use that to convince Mary of her new assignment. The Annunciation reads like many Old Testament birth announcements. There are three parts to a birth announcement. Usually an angel figure, a heavenly figure comes. That figure has an important message, usually introduced with behold. Behold, to introduce what they are about to say, and usually that is followed up with a conception story. And then once the angel has announced conception, they announce the child's name, what the child shall be called. And then after they announce what the child shall be called, they give a brief indication of the child's future, who the child will be, who they will become in the world, how they will be significant to their community, to their people. This was a common literary genre, birth announcements. It was also found in extra-biblical literature. But there's some challenges here in Luke 1 because the literary form talks about conception and talks about naming the child and talks about the child's future, but nowhere in the traditional birth announcement does it talk about resistance and reassurance. The person receiving the birth announcement might be shocked at first, but rarely is there any back and forth. After all, it is not about them. It is about the child that they are bearing. Mary disrupts the form. Mary disrupts the form of the traditional annunciation. Reverend Dr. Marvin McMichael says that unlike the other stories of miraculous motherhood running through the Bible, only Mary was being called upon to receive a child for whom she had not prayed, and to enter upon a mission that was both biologically and theologically inconceivable. Mary, instead of rejoicing, was taken aback by this news. Gabriel comes to her and he says, "Greetings, favored one. The Lord is with you." But Mary was perplexed. I imagine that Gabriel senses Mary's confusion. Maybe he even senses her fear because perhaps no one had ever called her favored before. Mary was poor, from a small town where they say nothing good comes from there. I imagine nobody had ever rolled up on Mary in the midnight hour and said, "Greetings, blessed one. Greetings, one of grace." I don't know about y'all, but if I were walking down some streets in DC and somebody came up to me talking about some greetings, "Greetings, favored one," I might be ready to fight. I don't know. There's only a few streets here in DC. I might be ready to fight. But Gabriel sneaks up on her, and he can tell that she is startled, and he can tell that she is perplexed, and he has to reassure her. The angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God." Gabriel has to reassure her, but reassurance is not a part of the traditional annunciation. Usually, most characters are excited. So Mary lacks excitement, which leads us to believe that this is not only an annunciation, this is also a call narrative. Mary is being called to do something that she never dreamed of, that she never conceived possible. Perhaps this is not just about announcing the birth of Jesus, but about calling Mary out of herself, this poor teenage girl who has been in the shadows her entire life, calling her out of herself to do something greater than she could ever imagine. You see, traditionally, the birth announcement places emphasis on the person being born, but the call narrative places emphasis on the person called to bear the burden, to bear the blessing, to be a prophet, to go on a mission. And often in a call narrative, the people resist. They resist the call of God. Y'all remember Moses? God calls Moses, and Moses says, I'm not the one, God. I'm not the one. I don't speak eloquently, but my brother speaks better than me. God calls Isaiah, and Isaiah tells God, I'm not the one. I am ruined and I have unclean lips. God calls Jeremiah, and Jeremiah says, I do not know how to speak. I am young. Mary disrupts what might normally be a simple annunciation because Mary resists. Mary got some questions. Mary got something to say. What is being asked of Mary and Mary's body, given her circumstances and given the consequences that will follow, is too much for Mary to just say yes without thought. This is no longer a birth announcement alone. This is Mary's call story. Mary resists the call of God, the tug of God. Now, many throughout the course of time have painted Mary to be a woman who lacked agency. That the Immaculate Conception has happened to her, not with her. It can appear that she has no choice in the matter. She has no voice. And we are sensitive to the fact that many birthing people today face a similar battle. No voice in what is being asked of their bodies. No choice, little agency in controlling one's decisions to bear and to birth. We have literally watched 50 years of agency be stripped away state by state. So it is fair to assume that Mary has no choice or voice in the matter. But here's the thing. When the angel speaks to her, Mary speaks back. Now, y'all know I love a woman who talks back. I love a woman. Mary ain't the first, and she won't be the last to talk back. I love a woman who talks back. Congress might not, and some churches might not, but I love a woman who talks back. When Gabriel speaks to her, she speaks back. Mary says to Gabriel, you got the wrong Mary. Now, y'all know Mary was a popular name back then as it is today. Actually, the Hebrew version of Mary is Miriam. You got the wrong Miriam, my brother. I'm Miriam Johnson. You must be talking about Miriam Jenkins up the street. You must be talking about looking for Miriam Jones or Miriam Jackson, but not me. You have the wrong one, Gabriel. How could this be? There is this beautiful play by a PhD student at Vanderbilt called The Call, or Of Course I Mind. It is a 5-minute reimagining of this particular biblical passage. I love the way she plays with the text. Gabriel is actually a woman in her play, and she says that Gabriella comes to Mary and tells Mary, you have found favor with God, so as a reward, you get an assignment. And Mary says, no, thank you. Gabriella says, I said you found favor with God. And Mary says, I heard you the first time. And Gabriella says, you don't even want to know what it is? And Mary tells Gabriella, the track record is a little tainted. I know Ruth And I know Esther, and I know what happened to Moses, and I know what happened to Jeremiah and to Noah. They all found favor with God, but had to go through hell and high waters, literally. Mary says, it's a no for me. This is not for me. You have the wrong person. Mary resists the announcement. She does not initially give herself over to the news of an unexpected baby like Elizabeth or Hannah or Sarah. In the short play that McIntyre wrote, Gabriella tells Mary that God is changing her course and asks her if she doesn't mind doing God a favor. And Mary responds, yes, I mind. I mind because I'm just a teenager, and I mind because I'll be ostracized, and I mind because I will be tainted for the rest of my life. I wonder how many of us have been there, where God has stepped into our lives and offered to change the course. I know there's a few people in here other than me who know what it's like for God to ask permission to change the course of your life. You know what it feels like for God to call you to do something at the most inopportune moment. But God, I'm already on this other path. What do you mean you are changing my course? And God is asking you to do God a favor for the sake of community, and you tell God, no. God, I don't want to do that. God, I'm already doing this thing over here. God, I'm already making such and such money over there. God, I'm already called down this. God, I just signed the lease to a new apartment. God, what do you mean you're changing my course? Because God's favor is going to cost you something. God's favor ain't all rainbows and cotton candy. Mary knew that being pregnant and unmarried in a time of political dysfunction and tyrannical leaders who put out decrees to kill newborn babies would be risky business. Anybody preparing to conceive right now or give birth right now who thinks and cares about the conditions of this world knows what it's like to wonder if bringing a new life in is the wisest decision. Mary knew that this favor was complicated. She knew. In my holy imagination, I imagine that she experienced much consternation, a back and forth with God and Gabriel. Maybe she even tussled with God. She even went to battle with God. However long her decision-making process was, Mary was given the chance to question. She was given the chance to express her concerns and to choose her response as wisely as possible. And Mary responds to Gabriel, let it be with me. It is a complicated let it be. I know many of us make this out to be a courageous move of Mary, and I'm not saying it isn't courageous, but it is also complicated. We read this story year after year and recite this passage, and often we make it seem as if Mary's let it be was a seamless and completely joyful act. As if she said it with joyful exuberance, let it be, when in reality it was very complex. I imagine Mary was uncertain about so many things. She was with the carpenter after all. They were at the bottom of the food chain where they were in their small town. I imagine Mary saying, let it be, but while she was also saying, let it be, she was wondering what she was going to eat for dinner at night, or where they were going to lay their head when their baby came. I imagine she was saying, God, I'm not sure exactly what we're going to eat for dinner tonight, but they have us begging for scraps underneath the master's table, but I trust that you wouldn't have given me this task if you wouldn't provide for me. So let it be. God, I'm not sure where Joseph and I are going to lay our heads. You know there is a tyrant in town, and we will become refugees, but you wouldn't have given me this assignment if you weren't capable of taking care of us. So, God, let it be with me. God, I know You have called some of us out here into a foreign land, separated from family and separated from community. You have called us to be your beloved community amidst all the things that we are up against. But we know that you wouldn't have given us this assignment as a church if you weren't prepared to take care of us. Let it be with us. Let it be is complicated. Let it be sometimes means laying aside dreams to answer the call that is on your life. Let it be with me sometimes means leaving behind community in order to pursue the voice of God beckoning you. Let it be sometimes means quitting your job so that you can pursue the next season of your life. None of these things are easy. As someone once said, if it were easy, everyone would do it. If it were easy, everybody would say, let it be with me. Mary's let it be was complicated. Yet it was a revolutionary act because Mary got a glimpse of a bigger picture that was beyond her personal circumstance. Mary's life would go on to be hard, and her child's life would go on to be even harder, but Mary's let it be was connected to the possibility that this one thing could set her community up for freedom and liberation in the future. It was bigger than her. I know that is a difficult message because we are very individualistic people, but her let it be was bigger than her. It was bigger than a shifting of her personal circumstances. It was about the promise that her mama and her grandmama and her nieces and her nephews might see a world better than the one she came up in. Let it be with me. Beloved, in these times of vast uncertainty, in times when things seem so uncomfortable, when many are experiencing heightened levels of stress and grief, and we are called to be voices for a people in need of hope and liberation in the midst of despair and depression, could we be the ones to say, let it be with us? If there is no promise of a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, could we still be the ones to say, let it be with me? We don't know exactly what changed Mary's mind, but we know that Gabriel shares with her that nothing is impossible with God. Perhaps that's all Mary needed to hear in her moment of uncertainty. Perhaps she just simply needed to be reassured of the infinite possibilities of God. My pastor, Mike Walren, uses that phrase all the time, the infinite possibilities of God. She just needed to be reassured that with God, everything and anything is possible, even if you cannot see what the end is going to be. Perhaps we all need to be reassured of the infinite possibilities of God. And perhaps that is the Christmas story. It's not going into debt over gifts. Perhaps it's not running up your light bill trying to outdo the neighbors. Perhaps it's not about what you will receive, the things, the monetary offerings you will get this year. Perhaps the story is about nothing being impossible with God, which makes way for us, even in the most horrific circumstances, to tell God, let it be with me. The Christmas story is us daring to believe year after year after year after year, in the most horrible circumstances we've ever witnessed or experienced, that nothing is impossible. And so we have hope in the midst of despair. We have joy in the midst of sorrow. We find ways to cultivate peace in the midst of a very violent world. And we find opportunities for us to say, let it be with me. Won't you sing with me the words of Let It Be this morning? As your Christmas song. I know you didn't think the Beatles made a Christmas song, but they did. I invite you to reflect on Mary's Let It Be when you find yourself in times of trouble, when your backs are against the wall, when you feel like there is no way out of the rubble. Could there still be a let it be in your spirit? Not just for you, but for your neighbor and your community. Let us sing.